They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I am Lou Ruggieri. That is Jose Ortiz. And this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. Wherever, whenever, and however you happen to be listening, we appreciate you taking some of your day to spend it with us. Hopefully it's been worth your while thus far. We spent the first hour recapping both AFC and NFC championship games. The Buccaneers facing the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. We have plenty of time next week to get into that game as it comes around. A little bit later, we are going to switch over to the NBA, some kind of go around the NBA in the week that was, and talk about what we've noticed and we're interested in. Right now, though, we're going to take a little kind of an interesting step sideways, I think. This is sort of just a week in sports, and there is some football, there's some basketball, there's some baseball, and I think that's where we'll start. We just call it This Week in Sports. I don't know if that feels like a copyright infringement on a TV show at some point, but I don't know. So we're going to call that until we get a cease and desist letter from someone. You can listen or send us a cease and desist letter if you'd like. You can follow along on the iHeartRadio podcasting app. We're proudly part of the Amazon podcasting family, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook and YouTube at the Benchwarmerz podcast, as well as Instagram at the BW Pod on Twitter. But right now, Jose, we kind of debated a little bit about this because we don't talk a lot of baseball. And the reason we don't talk a lot of baseball is the same reason we don't really talk a lot of college football and the same reason we don't talk a lot of college basketball. It's very regionalized. And, baseball never was that way, but it's more so now where, we're in the Northeast. So, we're happy to talk Mets and Yankees all day, but we don't really care too much about the Twins, or the Diamondbacks, and vice versa. People in Arizona don't really want to hear too much about the Yankees. So we kind of shy away from that a little bit. Football and basketball seem to be a lot more national and international. So that's why we don't do a lot of baseball stuff. But this story, Hank Aaron passing this week, seemed a bit transcendent, along with one other bit of information. It sort of relates to that. There was no one inducted into the MLB Hall of Fame this year. And those two things, I think, kind of go hand in hand because the big names on the ballot this year for the 9th year in a row were Curt Schilling, Roger Clemens, and Barry Bonds. And none of them were inducted. And, it kind of coincides very interestingly with, obviously Barry Bonds and Hank Aaron are sort of inexorably linked because Barry Bonds broke Hank Aaron's record. And there's this debate that rightly so that Hank Aaron is the true home run champ and Barry Bonds just has the numbers. But, Hank Aaron, we were not old enough to see him. His last game was October 3rd, 1976. So obviously that's some years before we were born. So it's, we only see highlights. When he broke Babe Ruth's record, there's kind of that video of him rounding the bases with those two doofy dudes who jumped on the field and were trying to run around with him. And that's basically it. But, Hank Aaron, I knew the name Hank Aaron, even before I really knew much about baseball. You hear Babe Ruth, you hear Mickey Mantle, things like that. But then you hear Hank Aaron too. And the one thing that I actually didn't know about Hank Aaron, which seems kind of odd in a way, he was only 6 feet tall. And at his heaviest, he was 180 pounds. And I did not know that. I had this vision of Hank Aaron as just this, his Hammer and Hank. I thought he'd be this huge guy just cracking balls out of them. Maybe it's because of Barry Bonds where I saw him hit, home runs and I just assumed Hank Aaron looked like that. But yeah, 6 foot, 180. So the other thing that I noticed about Hank Aaron, obviously aside from the obvious 755 home runs he hit, was that Hank Aaron was also, he'd take away the 700 plus home runs. Hank Aaron was a 3,000 career hitter. And
300, you mean?
No, he hit.
Oh, he had 3,000 hits. He had over 3,000 hits, yes.
Yeah. He was also a 300 hitting batting average, too. But that I knew. But yeah, he died at the age of 86, a little just shy of his 87th birthday, which would have been on February 5th. So a sad day. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1982. So he's been there for a while. So, nice guy. Very
things that stood out to me, I mean, obviously he's the Major League Baseball's all-time leader in RBI, also Major League Baseball all-time leader in total bases. But what really I've been watching a lot and reading a lot about Hank Aaron, as I'm sure a lot of people have.
Yep.
And here's a guy who, not to say that we're out of the woods or anything, but the 1960s and 1970s racism in America was much, much worse than anything that we can imagine right now. And here's a guy who was chasing maybe the most hollowed record in all of sports at that time.
Yeah.
Held by one of the most famous athletes in sports history still to this day.
Yeah.
Dealing with racism, dealing with everything, and carrying himself with such class and grace. And I just, in an era where it feels like many athletes are just playing to, worried about their brand or worried about their next contract and things like that. And not to say that Hank Aaron wasn't trying to make money or anything. It just felt like he really was playing for the love of the game. And I know that sounds stupid because everyone should be playing for the love of the game, but I don't know that that's true anymore. And that's really something that stood out to me as just what a classy guy on the field and off the field, playing for all the right reasons. So, go ahead. What were you going to say?
There's one player that he in sports that Hank Aaron reminds me of, and I think everything you said sort of echoes why this player reminds me, or why they remind me of each other in a way, and that's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because Kareem was a lot like Hank, and he was great in that same time span where it was not cool to be a black man, breaking white guys' records. And, Kareem obviously broke almost all the records. I mean, Wilt, a lot of them were Wilt's too, but Kareem was, he was the same way as Hank. He was very kind of understated, he not an attention seeker, not a big media guy, even back then, didn't do a lot of interviews, kind of just very, very humble, kind of reserved personality where, he just did what he wanted to do, and what he wanted to do was be great in this sport, and for Hank it was baseball, for Kareem it was basketball, and it just, it is interesting to think what they would have been like in a less harsh environment, and Hank, he never had a 50 home run season, which I thought was kind of fascinating. Now, he did have a 47, a 46, 45, several 44 home run seasons, but he never had a 50 home run season, which, is pretty crazy. I mean, he played 23 years, so he did compile quite a few, but it's, it's easy to forget the context. And like you're saying, the time period makes it just all the more special that he was able to kind of battle through not only the adversity of, pitchers trying to get him out, but he's getting death threats from people because he was going to break Babe Ruth's home run record. I mean, they had, the night that he did it in Cincinnati, they had snipers in the stadium. So it's to just put that in perspective. And then you think about those two dorks that jumped on the field. I mean, they're lucky they weren't shot in the head, because no one knew what they were going to do. I'm sure Hank didn't know what they were going to do. It's just crazy.
And if you watch the video, he turns and shakes their hand as he's running the bases. I mean, just think about that. In the moment, you're getting death threats. Here are two guys on the field after you hit 715, and you don't know what these guys are going to do, and you just turn around and shake their hands as you're running the bases. I mean, that's just straight up class. And speaking of a lack of class, I think part of, you mentioned the Hall of Fame. I think I'm not too surprised about Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens. At this point, I feel like the Baseball Writers Association has decided they just want to censor this era of baseball. And when kids ask why weren't any of these players inducted, we'll have to say because the Baseball Writers Association decided that they didn't want to have these guys in there. I have always thought that Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens both deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Both are among the greatest players of all time. I have yet to see anyone really quantify for me how many home runs or how many strikeouts or whatever it is that the steroids that they took created. And then even further, I think I'm not 100% sure about this, and I should double check. I don't think that Roger Clemens ever had a failed test. Bonds? He had people say Bonds had one failed test, which was during which was supposed to be where 102 people were tested, and it was supposed to be anonymous, and somehow his name and Alex Rodriguez's name got out.
Oh, the Mitchell report.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, David Ortiz was also on that list, and we don't really hear. We'll see if he'll be the next test case. To me, I have yet to see anyone really say, "Oh, well, he's not in the Hall of Fame because the steroids he took created 317 home runs."
Yeah,
and it has some factual evidence to back that up. The fact of the matter is, there are plenty of players who took steroids who ended up being garbage.
Well, that's sort of the point that I think is the truest of the bunch, and it's that Barry Bonds, because I agree. I think Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens belong in the Hall of Fame because in that you have to. Everything is context. Everything is about context. Just like we're talking about Hank Aaron, the enormity of what he did in context of the time that he did it in makes it so much more incredible than just another number. Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds were not the only pitchers and hitters on steroids. Certainly not the only hitter for Barry Bonds. We saw, what brought back baseball from the strike that almost killed them was the home run chase between Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. And it's not surprising that shortly thereafter, you would think that Bonds kind of said, well, these guys are getting all these accolades. I'll show them what a good player on steroids can do. And he did. And the thing is that despite how rampant and how prevalent steroids was, because the baseball wasn't testing for it for quite a duration there. I think that's another piece of context that gets left out. So it wasn't against the rules of baseball, and it might have been against the law to do it illegally, but it wasn't against baseball. So they weren't technically doing anything wrong for a while, and then they were banned. But that by that point, everybody was kind of on it. So and that's the thing. If pitchers are juicing and hitters are juicing, that's sort of a push at that point to me. And if everybody's doing steroids, don't just make you great at a sport. You have to they make you better in some cases. But like you said, we didn't see, there weren't a whole bunch of 70 home run hitters. There was 2, and there's only been 2. So I don't see how they belong in the Hall of Fame. Maybe you could put an asterisk, not necessarily next to their name, but just have a steroid era wing in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Just say, during this time, steroids were rampant. There's no proof of any of these people necessarily doing them, but it's noteworthy. And for the context where you start seeing these crazy home run numbers, these were people that were playing during this era.
Suspected of doing drugs.
Yes.
Yeah. Everything you said is spot on. It's basically like not telling your whole family history or something like that. Like, this is just a part of the history of the game, and it deserves to be. It should be enshrined in Cooperstown, because anyone who lived during that era knows that Barry Bonds is one of the greatest players of all time. That 4-year stretch from 2000 to 2004. I mean, some players take steroids and they end up having a good season, right? Barry Bonds took steroids and put up video game numbers, cartoon video game numbers. Like, this was insane. And as far as Curt Schilling, I'm a little disappointed that he's not in the Hall of Fame as well, because I think I don't want to get political on the show, but I honestly think it's because of some of the things he's tweeted and said that it's not has nothing to do with his play on the field. It's because he has some unpopular stances on some hot button issues that we don't necessarily need to get into right now. But it's just, that shouldn't even be into the discussion. It shouldn't even be a factor in he's not a Hall of Fame because he's not a nice guy. I don't care if he's a nice guy. Was he a great player or was he not a great player? And maybe if we didn't have Twitter and we didn't have this 24 hours following athletes around, that we wouldn't even know. Like, who knows what kind of players that we know all this stuff about Curt Schilling and current players because of the information era that we're in. We don't know what type of players these guys were in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s because there wasn't this level of coverage. Curt Schilling also deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. It's really a shame.
Yeah, well, Kurt Schilling, I think, doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame just for the ketchup packet he put in his sock against the Yankees. But that's my Yankee fandom bias. At Kurt Schilling, yeah, and the thing is, you're not off the field activities are not supposed to influence Hall of Fame voters in any of the big sports. I mean, we see that with football all the time. You know, Terrell Owens was kind of shunned for being, you know, Terrell Owens. We saw Michael Irvin shunned because he had drug issues and he was, you know, a bit of a womanizer when he was in college and all these, you know, these other things. It's the same thing for baseball, and Kurt Schilling is being, you know, he is being punished for some of his political views, which I don't necessarily agree with, but as a player, I mean, you can't argue. Like O.J. Simpson is a Hall of Fame football player. He is also probably a double murderer, but he still was one of the greatest football players we've ever seen. I can separate most. That's what you have. You have to separate the two. Is he a good person? No, he's a horrible person, but he was a great football player. Barry Bonds, he isn't a very nice guy from what I hear. He doesn't do interviews. He's kind of rude. He's aloof, but he was an unbelievable baseball player. And the thing is that those 73 home runs, they happened. You can't pretend like they didn't happen because they happened. We all saw them get hit. I remember I tuned in to watch him break Mark McGwire's record. Every game I was watching that whole season, I could not wait to see. Well, towards the end of the season, and he would just destroy those balls and send them into the water over the fence.
Yeah.
And you know, Schilling, I don't know. I think that he does belong. I think Clemens belongs, and I think Bonds belongs. I think that they all belong in the Hall of Fame because, like you said, that was part of baseball's history, whether you like it or not. You know, it's the same thing. Part of America's history, like we don't pretend slavery wasn't a thing. We're not proud of it. It's a horrible thing. We don't pretend like we didn't murder a whole bunch of Native Americans to be here. We're not proud of it. We don't celebrate it, but you can't tell the story of how we got here without telling that part of it. It's the same thing with baseball. We don't know how we got here unless you had to go through this steroid era, because that's when sort of fitness and gym and, you know, the whole muscle bound thing went out the window because we saw people hitting just these ridiculous home runs. And that's part of the history. You can't just pretend it never happened. All right. A former pitcher, we'll move on from baseball, but a former great pitcher in high school and I believe college too, Matt Stafford, switching over to the NFL. Matt Stafford is on the trading block, and he was, you know, talk about great arms. He probably could have made the Baseball Hall of Fame as a pitcher. We'll never know. But Stafford is on the trade block, and Jose, do you have a destination in mind where you'd like to see Matt Stafford go?
Well, I don't want to be biased, but 49ers are number one on my list for no particular reason at all, other than we have a quarterback on the team that needs to be cut. I've actually got a list of 4 teams that I think would be perfect destination: 49ers, Washington football team, the Saints, and the Colts. Those, to me, I've thought about it for a little bit. There might be someone else, another team I'm forgetting, but those teams seem like they have a hole at quarterback, and he's a very good quarterback. So
yeah, I think the Niners. I feel like the 49ers should probably. I think Matt Ryan. I think works. I don't know. I don't know if. I guess Matt Ryan's a better quarterback than Matt Stafford. I don't know. Matt Stafford's got more talent, I think. But
I think they're in the same tier. In the same tier to me.
Matt Ryan's more accomplished, and with Shanahan, I feel like, you know, there's that rapport that Matt Ryan has. But Matt Stafford, yeah, I think the Saints would be unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's just plug and play. The Colts, same thing. The Colts, I think, could do well with Stafford. You know, again, I'm biased. I think that the Cowboys would do much better with a guy like Stafford than Dak. We kind of got into an argument over the week about Stafford versus Dak, but you know, we can. I don't know. We'll see how the week progresses. Maybe we can get into that more next week. Yeah. But Stafford, I think, you know, I do want to thank Matt Stafford for not taking the Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson role and just retiring from wanting to leave, you know, Detroit and that just pathetically losing culture they have. I think that he has a lot more. I think he's 32. He's still a young guy.
Yeah, he's still 32. That's why I like him for one of these teams, because you could trade for him and then sign him to a 3 or 4 year contract.
Yeah,
and have him be your quarterback.
He could have another 10 years in him. I mean, another 5 years of prime window play at minimum. So, I mean, barring injury, but we'll see. Yeah, I think Stafford on the Saints is a good call. The Niners would fit for sure.
We just need an upgrade at quarterback. I'm not saying, and listen, we got into the argument over the weekend, Stafford versus Dak. I'm not saying that I don't think Stafford is better than Dak. I just don't think that, if you had to trade a first round pick or something to get Stafford, which I think you would have to, I don't think the gap is that large. And that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I do think, Matt Stafford, number one overall pick. I mean, he's more talented than Dak. You can make arguments about everything beyond that, but Stafford is. I could see him on the Patriots. I don't know if it's great. I think with Bill Belichick, obviously, it could be interesting. They need, obviously, as we've talked about all year in the last couple of years, New England needs better receivers, but. Matt Stafford, in terms of throwing ability, is certainly an upgrade over Cam Newton. I'm
curious what you think about. I know it's the Lions, but it's just I was looking at Matt Stafford's just his career, great career, but you realize in 12 seasons he only had one Pro Bowl appearance, which is it was astounding to me. I know you've been in the same with Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees, and perhaps that's probably the reason why. But it's just only one Pro Bowl appearance and only 4 winning seasons in 12 years.
I mean, that's the Lions, and that's also a product of being in the Brett. Well, no, he was in Aaron Rodgers mostly, right? Because Brett was gone from that division. Or no, he came back. So Brett Favre took over for a little while when he went to the Vikings. So, I mean, that's, that is a product of, bad timing more than maybe anything. And the Lions, are notoriously inept. It's just, it is what it is. And, Matt Stafford, if he stays on this trajectory, is going to be challenging, Drew Brees and Tom Brady for some of those records at the end. But obviously he's lacking severely in the win category. So maybe that's going to be a focus right now. And sort of maybe the Bears. I could see him going to the Bears.
That's another one.
I don't think that the Lions would trade him to the Bears.
Mm-hmm. Probably not.
He would be a good fit. I think he would fit really well there, actually. But we'll see. Staying in the North, although we're going to switch over conferences, the AFC North, Kevin Stefanski named NFL Coach of the Year. Chase Young, I'm going to take my victory lap right here. I predicted Chase Young was going to be the Rookie of the Year. Not that it was that hard to do because he was touted as being the best overall prospect in the draft last year.
Yeah. No, he was Defensive Rookie of the Year. I thought you said Rookie of the Year. He's Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Stefanski, I'm not surprised, took a Cleveland Browns team that was kind of a mess thanks to Freddie Kitchens and made them into what almost could have been a championship level team. Chase Young, fantastic. I don't know. That's
it's all. Yeah, there's not much else to say. Just well deserved for Kevin Stefanski. Real test starts next season when the expectations go up, and the same thing for Chase Young, and the same thing for Justin Herbert, who was named the NFL Rookie of the Year and the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Great season. It's going to be time when everyone has a whole year to prepare for you. That's really the next step. How do you perform when the expectations go up?
Yeah, and speaking of Rookie of the Year, the actual Rookie of the Year was Justin Herbert. Not surprising. He was also the Offensive Rookie of the Year. And Justin Herbert is, wow. Justin Herbert blew my mind this year. I think, he set the rookie record in passing touchdowns in one less game than the guys' records that he broke in Baker Mayfield. And I think that Justin Herbert just made Trevor Lawrence's life a lot harder because no one expected Justin Herbert to be great. Certainly not right away. But he came in and just dominated. And we see, a quarterback who comes into a good situation, he can be great. I mean, we've seen it over and over again. And Justin Herbert has talent. He has unbelievable talent. But I think Trevor Lawrence is going to go into a much less beneficial situation, probably with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think that if Trevor Lawrence, for all the accolades and all that, we've heard over and over and over again, he's a generational talent. He's, John Elway, Andrew Luck. It's a number one can't miss prospect. I think that if Trevor Lawrence had the season that Justin Herbert just had, if Justin Herbert hadn't just had that season, we would be fine with it. But now that we've seen Justin Herbert throw 30 touchdowns with basically no expectations, Trevor Lawrence, I don't know what he's going to have to do. He's going to have to throw for 75 touchdowns in his first year. I don't know what he's.
I think he could throw for 30 times. I think if he just matches, because what Justin Herbert did, first of all, I want to give us both a little bit of a victory lap, a minor victory lap. If you recall, when the draft happened and Justin Herbert went to the Chargers, we both said that was the best landing spot of any quarterback.
Yes,
because of all the talent they had on that team. Now that's people. We can try and talk different ways about it, but the talent you have around you at the quarterback when you're a quarterback is critical to the success you're going to have. Where Patrick Mahomes is not the same quarterback if he doesn't have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce to throw to. So what is it going to be? I'm trying to think of the wide receivers in Jacksonville right now. They're just escaping my mind right now. But
Shark.
DJ Shark, Keelan Cole.
If they have James Robinson as their running back.
James Robinson's a running back. Oh, Laviska Shenault.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's not. I don't know. If he gets drafted there, I wouldn't go in expecting him to throw 30 touchdowns. What we need to do is see some promise, though. You got to see high 20s, low teens, and around 4,000 passing yards. Basically, kind of a similar season. I mean, you can't expect him to have the greatest rookie season of all time.
I mean, but that's the expectation. That's the problem. That's what
I think the career, the expectation is more of the career, not necessarily in year one. Career-wise,
but everybody's attention spans are very short these days.
That's true.
And we did see Andrew Luck come in and do really well. He did flourish. Granted, he was surrounded by a pretty good team aside from offensive line until later on, and then he retired. But I think that the expectation, especially with more and more quarterbacks kind of coming in, just plugging and playing right away. I don't know. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a lot of pressure on him to say the least.
Absolutely.
Finally, in NFL news, Eagles hire Nick Sirianni as their head coach. This feels like a sideways step. I don't know if this is an upgrade over Doug Peterson. Truthfully, I don't know. I guess no one's really expecting much from him, so that's good. He's offensive.
He was the offensive coordinator under Frank Reich in the Colts. And so being that Frank Reich was the offensive coordinator under Peterson when they won the Super Bowl, the thought is, well, maybe he can bring some of that magic back to Philly. That's my only thinking that they must. I was reading they were blown away, had his interview, all this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I think the NFL is kind of trying to move towards not recycling old coaches and trying to get some new blood in there and see if they can spark the offense. We'll see. It's kind of a wait and see pick. I don't really have high expectations, but the team didn't play very well last year, so it's really the only place to go is up.
Yeah, I do wonder what this means for Carson Wentz. I guess if Sirianni was under Frank Reich, then that's a good thing for Carson Wentz. But I don't know. I think that the first question that Sirianni, I hope that he asked either Howie Roseman, their general manager, or Jeff Lurie, their owner, is what are you guys doing? What are we doing with Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts? I need to know what we're doing before I walk in here. I don't know if he did that. I hope that he did. I don't know if they gave him an answer. I don't know if they could. I think that it's such a cost prohibitive move to get rid of Carson Wentz that he might still be there next season.
Well, I think he's definitely going to still be there. And if I were the people, if I were Howie Roseman interviewing, I'd ask him, "What are you doing if you get this job? What are you doing with Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz?" I mean, wouldn't that be the other way that the question should go?
Well, I think it should go both. But if they're gonna, I mean, ultimately the manager and the owner have more power than the coach. So yeah. I would ask them and say, "I have an idea of what to do with them. Would you like to hear it?" But if you are gonna say, I don't want to get into that. If you're hell bent on either getting rid of him or keeping him, then I'll adjust my plan accordingly. But, I think it could go either way, but I think both have to have an answer to that question.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I think with the Eagles, as far as Carson Wentz, his value is too low right now to trade him, I think. I think you've got to let him play a little bit to kind of build some of that value back up.
I agree.
Like, you don't want to get 35 cents on the dollar right now. You want to try and get something more.
Well, let me ask you this, and I don't want to get too far into this, but if the Colts, like I said, I think the Colts have the 21st pick in the draft next season.
Right.
If the Colts say, we'll take Carson Wentz and his contract and we'll give you our 21st pick in the draft. I mean, don't you
absolutely
jump at that?
You jump over everything to do, like you do anything in your power to get that to happen.
What if it's their second round pick? I think just by taking that contract off their books alone, I think you still have to consider that, because you're trading him out of the conference, number one. And number two, you're opening up so much cap space by dumping that monster contract. I think that,
I think you have to take the deal. I will say that, and listen, I was wrong so far this season, during the season, but I'm still not really sold that Jalen Hurts is the future, like this future star at the quarterback position. We'll see what happens when teams have a little bit more tape on him and a little bit more time to prepare. But obviously he played better than Carson Wentz last year. So
yeah, we'll see. And again, all this off, we have a great offseason to look forward to. I'm very excited. I saw a thing, we won't get into it now, but I saw a tweet from Adam Schefter today that said he would put the over-under on NFL teams that have different starting quarterbacks next season at 18, and then he said, I would take the over. So
wow,
we might be in for an unprecedented...
Over half the league.
Yeah. So we can talk. Well, we can break that down maybe next week and talk about who we think is moving on and who's not. But for now, we're going to take a break and come back. We have to go around the NBA and kind of get into just some highlights of the week. And there is one big low light that we're collectively sad about. So we'll talk about that and more right after this on the Benchwarmerz podcast.
If you think or know you had COVID-19, you can be around others after 10 days since symptoms first appeared, and after 24 hours with no fever without fever-reducing medication, and after other symptoms have improved. If you have tested positive for COVID-19 and you had no symptoms, you can be around others 10 days after you got tested for COVID-19. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/coronavirus.
And now back to the Benchwarmers podcast with Lou and Jose.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm still Lou Ruggieri. That is still Jose Ortiz. And this is still the Benchwarmers podcast. It's been a tumultuous show thus far. We went into all of the AFC and NFC breakdown in the championship game in the NFL this past weekend. Earlier this hour, we kind of did our This Week in Sports, which we touched on quite a bit of baseball talk, which we rarely ever do, along with some football news, some awards being given out: Chase Young, Rookie of the Year; Kevin Stefanski, Coach of the Year; Justin Herbert, Offensive and full-blown Rookie of the Year. If you want to go listen to that and the rest of the shows, we can follow us along on iHeartRadio podcasting app, Amazon Podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google. You know where to find pod. If you're listening to us, you know where to find us. You can follow us along on social media if you'd like: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, at the Benchwarmers Podcast, at the BW Pod on Twitter. Jose, it's time for Around the NBA, and we have gone a little long this week, so we can keep this kind of succinct. Around the NBA, we were talking in the break that this is sort of, in case you missed it, these are sort of the highlights in the NBA, because the NBA, to be in full disclosure, is a lot less exciting in the regular season than the NFL is, because there's more games, obviously. So we kind of ramp up, and we're making progress. We're coming along. So these are just some highlights that we saw in the week that was the NBA. The first, Philadelphia 76ers back to the top of the Atlantic Division following back-to-back wins over the Boston Celtics. Joel Embiid is crushing the world right now. The Sixers are 12-6. Celtics are 10-6. Nets are 11-8. And then it's the Knicks and the Raptors. The Raptors are in last place. The Knicks are ahead of the Raptors. That blew my mind when I saw. I was like, wait, is it this year? Like, is that right?
The Knicks have actually been surprisingly not terrible this year. I don't want to say good, but surprisingly not terrible this year.
It's funny that we can say an 8-10 team is playing pretty well.
Well, yeah, when you factor in the context that I can't remember the last time the Knicks were 8-10 through 18 games. I bet it has to be at least 10 years since they were 8-10 through 18 games. Yeah. But yeah, I mean the Sixers are just not going away. There was a week or two ago where we thought Boston had caught them, and it was like, okay, well, this is it. The Philly's going to fall off. And Embiid, he's averaging almost 30 a game. It's time to really start talking about him in the MVP discussion, the early MVP discussion.
Very
very, very early, very, very early. But listen, this is kind of when the foundation of an MVP season gets started, gets set here, right? This first month and a half, he's averaging 27.7 points per game, 11.5 rebounds per game, 1.4 steals, 1.4 blocks, and his team's in first place. That's all you can ask for.
I mean, I think in a league where LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry are all playing, it's going to be hard for anybody not named those guys to really make a mark. I mean, obviously, or Giannis, I guess I should throw in there. But Giannis, I feel like the Giannis thing is we're kind of done with that.
You're yawning on Giannis. I'm sorry, I had to just throw that out there. And it's actually weird though. I kind of look at the other way around, where it's like these players who we've kind of come to take for granted a little bit, maybe with the exception of a guy like Curry or Durant because they were injured last year. But I kind of feel like writers or whoever votes, they tend to want to get new blood in there. I wouldn't be surprised if Doncic, another guy who's having a great year, Nikola Jokic. I wouldn't be surprised if either of those guys kind of end up stealing the show and winning MVP.
Durant, I mean, I think Durant is, because you're saying, I think it's a good redemption story in a way. He came back and battled back, and then he becomes, this back to form. So, I all that being said, I think it's going to be very tough for Joel Embiid to really make a mark in the MVP race. But the Sixers in general, I think are, they're a good team. Tobias Harris is still there. Danny Green, I think we forget about him. Dwight Howard is playing. He's there. Ben Simmons, a lot more pressure off him, especially with Joel Embiid playing as well as he is. So, yeah, the Sixers are it's not a fluke. I think that's the takeaway from this, is that it's that they're not in the lead in that division by accident.
Yeah, it's time to take this team seriously.
It is nice to see that Jaylen Brown back with the Celtics, so that might change things a little bit going forward. But the other team that's in competition in that division, possibly for the lead, is the Brooklyn Nets. They are 2-2 since Kyrie Irving's illustrious return. Back-to-back losses to Cleveland, which is just funny. The Nets, I feel like it's going to be a feeling out process. I think for the big three, as well as Steve Nash, I think that they're going to, once they find their groove, and if any one of them would decide to play defense, maybe they should just rotate and just say, all right, who's playing defense this game? Is it you, Durant? No. Is it you, Harden? All right. No, Kyrie's doing it this time. Just somebody has to play a little bit of defense sometimes. And I think
you completely stole my thunder. It's like, that's where this team is going to struggle. And even if you look at their head coach and Steve Nash, he certainly wasn't known for his defense. Yeah. You've got your three best players not known for playing defense. You've got a head coach not known for playing defense, who played for a coach who was not known for defense.
I think Durant does play defense. Durant, especially in the last couple of years we saw him, he made a concerted effort that was visible on the court to play better defense.
Yeah, he's an average defender with two guys who are below average defenders. Yes. I mean, it's like, I'm not saying he's
the Warriors. He started becoming a better defender. Yeah. I think he was taking that knock, and Durant's a sensitive guy, and he battled back, and he did play more defense. So obviously, by contrast, the other two guys, I mean, I think I could score on either of those guys just because they wouldn't even care. So
the big problem they're going to have, because we know that they can drop points, the big problem they're going to have is on their defense. And when you have Colin Sexton, and no offense to Colin Sexton, he was my highlight of the week a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But you have Colin Sexton dropping 42 points on you. Like, what's Jason Tatum going to do to you? What's LeBron James going to do to you? What's Luka Doncic? Like, I mean, I guess we should stay in the Eastern Conference, but like, what are the elite? What is Joel Embiid going to do to you if Colin Sexton's dropping 42 on you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they're not going to struggle for points. They just have to keep the opposing team under the points that they can score, and it's going to be a problem. And that's sort of that Mike D'Antoni. He's not the coach, but he is there. And Steve Nash is sort of he played under Mike D'Antoni, and that's when he won. So, they're, again, like you said, they're not known for their defense. So, going to be you don't have anybody kind of pressuring these guys who are already not defensive-minded players to play any more defense. So, should be it's going to be an interesting season regardless. It's nice to see the Nets relevant for sure.
Yep.
The other side, the Clippers are 13-4. Lakers are now 14-4, and Utah is 12-4. and they seem to be kind of they're on their own tier of play in the West. And I'm curious, out of those three, who do you think is going to remain at the top?
Well, I think the Lakers are clearly, to me, they're in a class by themselves. I know the record doesn't show that, but the way they've been playing, it just feels like it's almost too easy for them right now.
Yeah,
they're 10-0 on the road this season, which is weird because they're 4-4 at home. It's like how is that even possible? But they've been better on the road than they've been at home. The Clippers have won 7 straight. I just like what the Lakers are doing. I think they have something together. They've got the confidence of having won together last year. They've reinforced their bench and their starting lineup with moves in the offseason. The Clippers are going to be strong. And I think Utah's. I don't think Utah's going anywhere either. But I think the Lakers are clearly the best team in the NBA right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's Utah looks good, and Denver, while they're not in this class, is looking. They look good, and it actually leads me to my highlight of the week this week, and that's Nikola Jokic. He was named Western Conference Player of the Week. Mm-hmm. He is averaging a triple-double, and his 46 triple-doubles are the most in team history already. So he's just, he doesn't look the part, but he certainly plays the part.
Yeah, I think he's one of these players who basically after this season, everyone in the NBA and every casual NBA fan is going to know his name and start remembering him as one of the better, probably top 10 players in the game right now.
I think your highlight also stems from Western Conference, right?
Yeah, well, my highlight of the week is Steph Curry passing Reggie Miller for second place all time in three-pointers. Reggie Miller did it in 18 seasons. Curry is in his 12th season. And now has his sights set on passing Ray Allen, who has the most all-time, about 400 more three-pointers, which is like a season and a half for Curry.
Or one good season.
Yeah.
Which he's done already.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just go right to my low light of the week. It's the Southeast Division in the Eastern Conference. It's just terrible. Atlanta, Orlando, Charlotte, Miami, and Washington. Not one team above 500, which includes the Heat, who just can't seem to put it together. Though it is worth noting that Jimmy Butler has only played 6 games this season. So when your best player is out, it's going to be tough for you to be at your best. So
the Southwest Division isn't better. Actually, they're worse. The Grizzlies are 7-6. The Spurs are 9-8. The Mavericks are 8-9, which blows my mind. The Rockets are 6-9. The Pelicans are 5-10. So yeah, the Southwest Division not much better. Obviously, I think there's more expectation in the other side, but maybe not. I don't know. That's an interesting debate right there. But
the South is just not playing well in the NBA right now.
Yes, that's fair. All right, good. Broad brush generalized. Yeah. My low light is something that I think is everybody's low light. It's the year anniversary of the death of Kobe Bryant. And it's just hard. I didn't realize it right away, but I once I looked at the date, I realized that, I remember waking up and one of my friends had texted, one of my friends who isn't even a basketball fan. She just kind of was, I don't know. She's always like plugged into the news. And she texted me and said, "Did you see what happened with Kobe Bryant?" And I thought, first I thought she was wrong because she's not a sports fan. So I was like, you don't know what Kobe Bryant is. Get out of here. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh my God. And that was before he was confirmed dead. It was just he was in this horrible helicopter accident. And, it's just I feel like it set off the year that was 2020. That was the tone that was set where you're just it was just shock and dismay and just complete disbelief where you're like, that can't happen. That can't happen.
Yeah.
And that is basically the feeling I felt for the entire length of 2020 was this can't be happening.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a very similar story where someone I worked with, a girl who doesn't really follow sports, I just happened to be home and she sent me a text, "Hey, did you hear about Kobe Bryant?" And she sent me a story and I was like, there is no way that this is true. This is a fake story. Obviously the internet we know is filled with fake stories. I was like, oh, she just got duped. And then I go on this search all over the internet to try and find it. And at first I couldn't find it. but I told my wife about it, and she's the master of finding anything on the internet, and she found it immediately. And we couldn't believe it. And it's just, I mean, I think, what is it, it would have been 44. I mean, he's only a few years older than we are. And just to have that, to have his life taken away so prematurely.
Do you have any, like, what are your, when you think Kobe Bryant, what moments come to mind immediately?
There was a stretch in the 2005, I wouldn't say the 2005, 2006 area where, like, I just felt like there was no shot he couldn't hit. Like, it was just like, sometimes he would just shoot these shots where you're like, oh, there's no way he can make that. And then he would make it. And there's like a 2 or 3 year period where he was just unreal as an offensive player, where just he couldn't be stopped. He could drive to the basket. He could shoot. And I just remember there was a series that he had against the Phoenix Suns when Steve Nash was there, and they were looking great. And he just kept hitting dagger after dagger after dagger throughout that series. And at that point, I was like, this guy is just amazing. He's untouchable. There's just nothing you can do against him. And they went on to win the NBA Finals that year, I believe, knocking off, I think it was Dwight Howard's Orlando Magic at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been, 2009-ish, around there?
Was it 2009? I thought it was earlier than that. Either way, it was basically in that period of time. That's when I think of Kobe Bryant. I know, the Shaq and Kobe Lakers were a big deal, but I really, to me, vintage Kobe is in that 05 to 09 era where he was just unquestionably the best player in the game.
Yeah, a couple of things. I remember when he got drafted back in 96, I think. And at the time, we were super young, and I was a Charlotte Hornets fan growing up. I liked the Bulls, but I was a Hornets fan. I was a Jordan fan more than I was a Bulls fan, but I liked the Charlotte Hornets. And I remember hearing all this buzz about this kid, from like the Philadelphia area, Kobe Bryant. And then the Hornets drafted him, and I was like, oh man, that's great. They got that guy that everybody's talking about. And then they immediately trade him for Vlade Divac. And that was pretty much the end of my Hornets fandom. I think that ended right there that day, because I was like, I didn't like Vlade Divac when he was a Laker. Why would you? And that was when I realized, that's when I started realizing that Jerry West is sort of a wizard, in the same way that Brad Stevens is in the East, where it's just, if somebody calls you to trade, if Jerry West is calling you and you're looking to trade for somebody, hang up the phone immediately. But that was one. And then there was another moment. I don't know what the year it was. It had to be in that same era that you're talking about, where there was an All-Star game, and he was. It was when LeBron and Kobe were on the same floor. And there was a moment in one of those All-Star games where LeBron has the ball and he stops, and Kobe is right there guarding him, and Kobe yells to LeBron, "Shoot it!" And I after the fact, I think what I realized, and I'm not sure if I heard this from somebody that was there, or maybe I don't know if I put it. I want to believe that I put it together myself, but I don't think I was that smart. That Kobe knew, he was always very self-aware. And he was aware of that everyone in the world was watching that matchup right then and there. Everybody wanted to see Kobe versus LeBron. And he knew the enormity of that moment right then and there in real time. And that, to me, I was like, wow, that's, he, as much as we like to paint him as just, Michael Jordan 2.0, he was not afraid, and just by that alone, I think that was what impressed me the most, is that he came in basically saying, it's an insurmountable task to say, I'm going to be Michael Jordan. Like, no one can do it. And Kobe almost did it, and he embraced it.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to throw out there that people may not realize about Kobe and all his scorings, 12-time all defensive player in the NBA, 12 times.
Yeah. Wow. So, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, he's not only, that's what makes him, to me, the closest. I'm not saying the closest just in skill set to Michael Jordan, where he has the scoring ability, but he also can bring it on the defensive side of the ball, plays the same position. just an all-time great player.
Yeah, we forget about Jordan's defensive prowess.
Yeah.
And I certainly forgot about Kobe's defensive prowess. I didn't even think of it. I did not know that. That's crazy. But yeah, so that's our collective low light for the week. Rest in peace, Kobe. You're going to be missed. So yeah, it's crazy year that it's been. So that's going to do it. Actually, this show's went a little long, but I think that it's been worthwhile. I think we got a lot in a very short amount of time, even though it was a little longer than normal. So we got more to talk about. Next week is, we're going to prep for the Super Bowl. And so we have all that to get to and probably some more NFL news because there's going to be, I think, an awards, the Pro Bowl, the awards are all coming up. So we're going to have plenty to talk about. But until then, that's going to do it. So for Jose Ortiz, I am Lou Ruggieri, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.